here on the dais. First inviting our distinguished chair of the session, Mr. Ramesh Abhishek, Secretary, DIPP. May I request you, sir, to please join us here on the stage, please. And inviting Mr. Amitabh Kant, the CEO of Niti Aayog, our keynote speaker, one of the key drivers of the Make in India program. Inviting Mr. D.K. Saraf, the Chairman and Managing Director of ONGC, one of the most premier E&P companies in the world. Inviting now the CEO and Managing Director of L&T Hydrocarbon Engineering, Mr. M. Subramanian Sarma. In fact, delivering design to build engineering and construction solutions across the entire hydrocarbon spectrum. Our next speaker, Mr. Sanjay Gupta, the Chairman and Managing Director of EIL, providing engineering, consultancy and EPC services. And our knowledge partner, Mr. Amit Khera from McKinsey. Just to inform also the structure of this session, we have the theme presentation, the context setting by our knowledge partner. It is then going to be chaired by Mr. Ramesh Abhishek, Secretary DIPP. Thank you. So may I request Mr. Amit Khera from McKinsey, our knowledge partner, to please make his presentation as we set the context of this session. Thank you.
Should be okay. Straightforward. Thank you. Hello, welcome everyone. My esteemed panel here, Mr. Kant, Mr. Abhishek, Mr. Saraf, Mr. Gupta and Mr. Subramaniam, members of the audience. I will take around 8 to 10 minutes to introduce the topic. I think the topic is not new. Make in India has been a buzzword in India for the last 2 to 3 years, since the time the PM announced it from the ramparts of the Red Fort. But I would just try to do 3 things, and I would talk about Make in India in the context of the oil and gas sector, given this is Petrotech. I think one, set the context around the demand in India. And I think all of us, we have heard for the last 2 days, but just talk about from our perspective, and the message there is that demand in India as well as the spend in India is quite high. As though the world sees a downturn, we see an upturn. So that's message number 1. I think then I will try to focus the discussion in oil and gas to a few sectors and a few pieces of equipment and services. I will try to show some analysis that we have done on what are the most relevant pieces of the sector or of the value chain that we need to think about in terms of Make in India. And then lastly, leave a few thought starters based on learnings from other countries, learnings from successful sectors in India and our experience. So this, I think, is everyone knows, a lot of demand for oil and gas in India first, 4 to 5% expected growth between oil and gas. This is some analysis we have done recently. We will release a report tomorrow around what we see as energy scenarios, but in all scenarios, demand for oil and gas is strong. And as we looked at project spending, and this is an upstream example, over the last few years, we are seeing spending is going down in the world, and which is the light blue line that you see here, and spending is going up in India. So India is at some level going opposite to the world trend. We are seeing a lot of investment in upstream. And then last year or so, 4 or 5 things happened in terms of gas policy for difficult fields, HELP. There were several policies for easing out contract administration, Hydrocarbon Vision 2030, where Northeast was released, discovered small fields round was done. So largely, I think we are therefore expecting, not just in the short term, the last chart you saw on upstream side was for the next 2 years, but even going forward, activity in India is expected to be quite robust. On the downstream side, these are announced projects. We have a refinery capacity of close to 230. We are going to 252 by 2020 and 293 by 2025. Again, these are announced projects. The large greenfield refineries have not been included. We are sure some will come. And on gas side also enough work is happening. So that was first message. A lot of activity, a lot of spend a lot of demand in India. So India is a great destination just in terms of demand. So that's point number one. In terms of what has in the oil and gas sector, now bringing back what has worked well in terms of Make in India and indigenization, there are three things that come to mind. I think with EIL playing a major role, downstream we are already at 80-85% indigenization. So therefore, any discussion on Make in India, I think we should not largely do around downstream. I think the only critical pieces of equipment there possibly are rotary equipment, compressors, which we import. Upstream onshore is again efforts that ONGC made over the past to develop a vibrant services sector in the country. So upstream onshore is also largely, we would say, indigenized, and therefore is also at some level going forward out of scope. And EPC for pipelines also largely happens in India. So upstream E&P therefore is one area which we can focus on, or we should focus on, and this is some analysis that we have done. In terms of if we just see the spending that the Indian upstream companies are doing today in terms of dollar and or foreign currency and Indian currency, we would say that 20 to 25% is the level of indigenization, and the rest is all imported. And then we started correcting this number by what Indian companies spend out or what foreign companies spend in India, and the number comes close to 25 to 30% in upstream. And this is also broadly in line with what MOPNG came out last year with 32% when they took an aspiration for 50%. So upstream is definitely an area where there is a lot of scope to go. And these are advantages. A lot of FDI can come, a lot of jobs can come. I think all of us know that. But I would go to even in upstream the next level in terms of indigenization. And we created this sort of a framework where we said there are imports on one axis and capability in India on one axis, and things that are therefore on top right, we have to do procurement from local vendors. And these are things like jackup rig hiring, EPC offshore contracts, etc., vessels. These on the top right are things that are, we should move towards Make in India as soon as possible. There is a lot of spend and there is a lot of capability in India already. So these are top right are things which we should start promoting procurement from local vendors. Then in the middle, where capability in India is low or it's developing and value of imports is also, I think, then the top, the middle corner is we will have to do something to plug capability gap. The capability in India is not that high. And again, the top things here, which is jackup rigs construction and EPC offshore contracts, I think these are possibly the one where capability, there are few companies in India, not many, which can do this. So that's the second clunk or second group of things. And then the third is where things are a bit far off in terms of, for example, floaters, offshore or deep water wireline logging, etc., where things are a bit far off and we might have to develop capability over long term. So this is again an attempt to focus a bit more in terms of really what to go after when we say Make in India. We've looked at other companies. I think there are 3 or 4 things. Norway did it well. They did local content of 50%. We know there have been talks in India about some of this. They provided financial levers, tax breaks to companies, and they did capability building measures. For example, they mandated all companies to spend 50% R&D spend in Norwegian Institute. So Norway did well based on 3 levers. Similarly, Brazil also did this well. They also had local content requirements when in the last when they were doing deep water. Again, they gave incentives, and they also took capability building measures, and they actually increased. For example, shipyard workforce is one thing that they went really after, and they increased workforce from 2,000 to 50,000. So, in the last year, 2 years, I think multiple measures are already on in India in terms of, we know there is 100% FDI. There are other incentives around reduced cess, CVD-free import of equipment. So that's one which is already going. There is a skill development mission already. We are doing well in terms of ease of doing business with the efforts of DIPP. And largely, I think lastly, PCPIRs is a concept that have been promoted very aggressively by MOPNG. So we are doing things in this direction. And therefore, there are 4 thoughts we want to leave the panel and the audience with in terms of way forward. I think local content requirement, I think some of it may be challenging given WTO, but is that one idea we consider. We say there is a roadmap in 3 to 5 years on this particular equipment. We will increase or we will enforce local content, or we will run QCBS type of contracts to give weightage to people who do local content. I think that's just one theme of idea to promote local content and more manufacturing. And the second one is fiscal incentives. I think can we mandate, just like Norway did, can we mandate our companies to spend some percentage of money on R&D, because R&D ecosystem is important. Can we give incentives to operators who go after or who use local content? So that's the second line of potential levers. I think ease and viability of businesses. I think this hubs for petroleum specific industries, similar to what we used to, or what SEZs. Can we create 1 or 2 of these hubs? This was also recommended by the Kelkar committee 2-3 years back, but that seems to be one idea that could potentially develop some sort of hubs. I think given when we talk to people who can invest in India, they talk about that demand in India, at least short term, is not that high, and they might have to export. So can we create these hubs where we do not just meet for India, but they also are export hubs? And the last one is human capital. Would be very important, as we saw from Norway and Brazil examples. They focused a lot on people. Where can we start thinking about research institutes, or we have actually research institutes, but how do we increase collaboration between industry and institutes? And focused on oil and gas sector, are there any PhDs or MScs that we can start? So these were some thoughts. So just closing on, there is a great opportunity in India. There are some sectors where we already have achieved good success. Upstream, especially offshore, seems to be one area where there is a lot of potential. We have already taken an aspiration to go from 32 to 50, which is in line with many countries. And there are these 4 or 5 ideas around local content, around incentives, and especially around building these economic zones, which could help us move forward. So with that, I close and hand over to Mr. Abhishek as session chair.
Very good afternoon. My co-panelists, Mr. Amitabh Kant, Mr. Dinesh Kumar Saraf, Mr. Subramaniam Sarma, Mr. Sanjay Gupta, Mr. Amit Khera, ladies and gentlemen. This is a really good time for this important meeting to take place when India is the fastest growing economy among all the major economies of the world. We clocked 7.6% GDP growth last year, and all the predictions are that we are going to do even better in the coming years. Our Make in India program is aimed at doing business easy in the country, providing all the necessary policy framework, tax policies, ease of doing business, skill development, and infrastructure development in a focused manner, so that manufacturing in India becomes competitive and attractive. If you see what has happened in the last 2.5 years, our FDI policies have been hugely liberalized. Mr. Amitabh Kant has been the architect of many of these critical changes in FDI policy framework and investment promotion. The result has been very impressive. In the last 2.5 years, we have attracted $129 billion of foreign direct investment in the country, which is almost 40% more than what was attracted in the corresponding period previously. We are seeing a huge amount of interest in FDI and among the foreign investors in investing in India. In case of hydrocarbon sector, we have seen $6.7 billion investment in the last 15 years. Obviously, there is a huge scope for improvement. We are the third largest energy consumer in the world, and hydrocarbons have a very good share of that energy requirement. And as our GDP growth picks up more and more in future, you can imagine the kind of energy requirement we'll have and the very important role this sector has to play, and the need for more and more investments, as has been brought out by Amit in his presentation. Another important area of Make in India has been improving the ease of doing business. This has been one of the most important priorities of the government in the last 2.5 years. We have done a lot of work in making our business climate easier and more friendly. Now, government is business friendly not only in the central government, but also in most of the states. Apart from doing better on the World Bank, doing business reports, and we are going to do much better in the coming years because of the kind of fundamental changes that are coming in. Even the states are on board. The states are competing with each other in a very healthy way on a very transparent public platform on doing business. And regulators are also coming on board. So we have a regime in which central government, state governments and regulators are all trying to create a business-friendly climate in the country. As our Honorable Prime Minister had stated, that his vision is to see that we provide red carpet to foreign investors and not red tape. And this is true of all investors, domestic as well as foreign. Skill development is another area which is critical part of Make in India, and I'm sure a lot of work that is being done, this will benefit this sector as well. In this, we have huge scope for investment in hydrocarbon sector. In POL product segment, 60% of the products are carried by pipelines in USA. In India, it's only 35%. Another huge scope for investment in transportation of POL products through pipelines. Government has given a lot of incentives for natural gas marketing, and the target is to connect 300 cities with city gas distribution networks by 2022. That presents another significant opportunity for investments. We also need to make significant investments in the entire value chain. We have also just seen that there is much more scope, of course, in the upstream activities for investment. In the last 5 years, the Indian PSU companies have invested 8 lakh crore rupees of investment in this sector, and they are going to invest another 3 lakh crores in the next 3 years. I think this kind of policy framework in which 100% FDI is allowed in automatic routes, in exploration of oil and gas, and marketing and distribution of petroleum products and natural gas, the kind of ease of doing business, the kind of policies Government of India, Ministry of Petroleum, Natural Gas is coming up with, the kind of huge requirements that we are looking at, I think this is a really good time to make in India. And I think investments in this sector are not only much needed, they will also reap rich dividends, and I'm sure that all of you will take advantage. The DIPP is fully committed to work with all the stakeholders, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, PSUs, private sector, foreign investors, and all stakeholders to make sure that this process of investing in India and doing business in India is easy and is facilitated. Our investment promotion company, Invest India, is there to facilitate all investments, and we also urge you to take advantage of the work of Invest India, who in about 1 year time, they are now facilitating $45 billion of FDI in the country. So this is the kind of work that is being done, and this is going to be scaled up. So our policies, our agencies, everything is geared to making things easy, doing business easy, and I'm sure you all will take advantage. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Kant, if you could share a few words.
My fellow panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Ramesh said, India is growing at about 7.6% per annum. But the challenge is really to grow over a 3-decade period at much higher rates of 9 to 10% per annum, year after year, to be able to lift a very young population above the poverty line. And this cannot be done till we don't drive our manufacturing sector, and the manufacturing doesn't rise to about 25% of India's GDP. And for manufacturing to rise to 25%, you need a very, very aggressive energy policy, because energy demand is going to triple if India is going to grow at those rates. But for India to be able to meet its energy demand, my view is that India needs a very predictable, very consistent, and a clarity of policy over a long period of 3 to 4 decades. Because without a this is a very capital intensive sector, and till you don't have predictability, consistency and clarity of policy over a long period, it will be very difficult to attract investments. And therefore, my belief is that the key to this sector is a policy framework which stands the test of time. Today's discussion is about Make in India, and to my mind there are three perspectives of Make in India in the energy sector. One is about discovering oil and gas in India rather than importing it. The second is manufacturing the equipment used in this sector in India. And the third is developing in-house expertise in our own companies to provide the necessary services, technology, manpower required in this high-tech industry. If you look at a very large Indian petroleum sector, we are working on all the three components. Our national oil companies, Indian Oil, ONGC, Reliance, SR, GAIL, BPCL, they are all actually delivering oil and gas across the length and breadth of the country. Now, these are companies which are globally active in all continents, owning shale gas assets, refineries, exploration, producing acreages. And to my mind, there could be no better example than our oil companies engaged in promoting Make in India. And Make in India, they have penetrated global markets. But to my mind, Make in India in energy sector does not mean mindless reservation of a sector for Indian companies. This is a high technology sector. This is capital intensive sector in which partnerships play a very significant role. Most independent oil companies are global in nature, and they are integrated across discovering, refining and distributing oil and gas. They work with local companies in Russia, Gulf, Africa, Brazil, among others, from where oil is exported to markets where petroleum is refined and then marketed there itself, or even exported back to the crude exporting country as refined product. Hence, to my mind, Make in India is about an intelligent choice as to how we do value addition in Indian manpower, deployment of Indian capital and Indian manufacturing. And value addition is really the key. Our approach to Make in India and petroleum sector, to my mind, needs to be such that global companies come to India and find it rewarding to discover oil here, and to be able to attract the best global companies to come to India, because we've only extracted a very minuscule percentage of our vast resources. To be able to get global companies, the finest global companies, to come to India and find it rewarding, we need to create a very, very predictable framework. There needs to be an incentivized atmosphere for new Indian companies also to get into the business and grow to become oil majors. And the important thing is that unless you allow companies to create wealth, and unless they don't create wealth, India will not be able to create wealth in this sector. And therefore, it's very important that we create an incentive structure which is on par with internationally the best, and make it available for global companies as well as for Indian companies. And especially get new companies into the business and enable them to become oil majors. And for this, the government will have to assist by providing infrastructure for the local value chains to grow. I am quite delighted that Mumbai has come up as an active petroleum-related IT center with global companies like Schlumberger's, CGG, PGS having set up data processing center there. And now Kakinada is coming up for hardware and offshore services. And we should really provide support to state governments to achieve this objective. The recently concluded bidding round for discovered small fields is a good example of Make in India. We've seen how a number of small Indian companies have bid for them because there was an attractive framework. The large presence of Indian engineers and technocrats in this industry provides the right condition, as local capital can now join hands with them to create a vast number of startups as well. We are all aware that Houston, for instance, houses a large number of Indian oil and gas experts who can be attracted back by the present policy framework to come back and join the lucrative Indian oil hunt. We have supported the Make in India in this sector by recommending to the government from Niti Aayog that OIDB fund should be deployed for development of infrastructure for service sector to cater to the seismic appraisal and drilling activities, and this to my mind is really critical. We have also recommended that on the lines of Aberdeen, Houston and Perth, we should promote a petroleum hub in the East Coast. We are also examining how we can promote manufacture of LNG carriers in India. Now, India's rising oil and gas demand will drive investments along the entire petroleum value chain in the coming decades. And therefore, we need to create the right ecosystem which will get further fillip with the coming in of GST, and I think we need more labor law reforms, and all this GST, labor reforms, ease of doing business, all this will push the petroleum sector. And therefore, the petroleum sector has the potential. You know, we are in a global frame, we are essentially in a globalized framework. This is a global world. And it's important that India must become an integral part of this global framework. And therefore, my perspective of Make in India is where foreign and Indian companies come together to explore, discover, refine and market oil and gas in India and tap its vast, huge potential based on a very predictable and consistent policy framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amitabh Kant. As usual, Mr. Kant is very inspiring always. Now I request Mr. Dinesh Kumar Saraf to address the audience.
Mr. Ramesh Abhishek, Secretary, DIPP, Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO Niti Aayog, Mr. Subramanian Sarma, CEO and MD of L&T Hydrocarbon Engineering, Mr. Sanjay Gupta, EDEIL, Mr. Amit Kheda from McKinsey, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It gives me an immense pleasure to be here amongst a galaxy of eminent personalities to share my thoughts on Make in India. India's economic growth has doubled the energy consumption in last 15 years. However, still, in terms of per capita consumption of energy, India is 1/3 of the global average. Our economic growth is also one of the highest among the world's large economies. As we grow in the years to come, we would witness further upswing in energy demand. India imported about 3.9 million barrels of crude oil per day in 2015 to cater to its growing petroleum products demand. Going forward, India's dependence on oil imports in absolute terms may further rise. At the same time, with more than 48% of its sedimentary basin still unappraised, there exists a huge potential for hydrocarbon exploration and production in India. There is a need for aggressive domestic exploratory efforts to accelerate untapped oil and gas reserves. A meaningful success here will have multiplier effect across the entire hydrocarbon value chain. Honorable Prime Minister of India has envisioned an energy sufficient India and has set a target to reduce the import dependency by 10% by the year 2022. I fully subscribe to the views of Honorable Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas in his inaugural address yesterday that this is achievable. The upstream sector, NOCs and private E&P companies from India and abroad would need to increase exploration and monetization efforts and improve operational efficiency with enabling fiscal and regulatory environment put in place. Indian exploration has witnessed world-class discoveries. Discoveries in KG offshore and Rajasthan are pointers towards this. Government has also taken several policy initiatives for encouraging investment in Indian upstream sector. The list of such initiatives is too long. Just two initiatives out of this: launching of Hydrocarbon Exploration and Licensing Policy, HELP, which is a bundle of reforms comprising open acreage system, uniform licensing framework, revenue sharing against profit sharing, meaning thereby minimal role of the government in E&P decision making, pricing and marketing freedom for oil and gas. And another policy reform is attractive prices for difficult gas, that is high pressure, high temperature gas, and deep water and ultra deep water gas for new production. Attractiveness of Indian E&P sector along with recent enabling environment has resulted in successful conclusion of bidding round for discovered small fields recently. Carrying out exploration and production activities in India, I feel in itself is Make in India with multiple backward and forward linkages. In fact, the value addition to revenue ratio of E&P is one of the highest among all the industries. This establishes a strong case for participation by private sector companies from overseas as well as India in our E&P sector. And I urge upon the E&P companies to come forward and participate in Indian E&P sector. 60 years back, when we started E&P activities in India, there was virtually no domestic supply of oil and gas equipment and services. However, ONGC took it forward and became a pioneer in the initiative of indigenization. ONGC's indigenization group has developed many Indian vendors across the hydrocarbon value chain. I take pride in sharing with you today that manufacturing units for tubulars, oil well cement and chemicals, oil field equipment, drilling rigs, supply vessels, etc. have developed their bases in India and expanded their business with the support of ONGC. Besides this, ONGC has also supported our own sister company, Engineers India Limited, Mr. Sanjay Gupta is here, its CMD, to emerge as international design EPC, PMC company in the upstream sector as well. Many LSTK contractors and domestic private shipyards at Pipavav, Hazira, Katupalli, etc. have also gained oil and gas expertise, emerging as international players. At a time when the global oil and gas companies are not making any further investment in oil and gas exploration and production because the prices are too low and it does not make, as per them, economic sense to make further investments in oil and gas business because the prices have come down from $120 per barrel in 2014 to today $45 or so. ONGC in this environment has taken a contrarian view. With the focus of monetization of its discovered reserves, ONGC in the last 2 fiscal years has approved projects worth over $12 billion US, which will translate to monetizing additional oil and gas production of over 1.2 billion barrels of oil and oil equivalent of gas. Most significant among these is investment approval for development of fields under cluster 2 of our deep water NELP block in eastern offshore KG DWN 98/2. This involves a capex of $5.076 billion, the highest ever investment plan in any single project in the history of ONGC. All these projects are under implementation. Even in a low oil price scenario, we have sustained our capex levels during last 3 years. This is to ensure increase in our domestic hydrocarbon production. With more than 60% of E&P spent on specialized oil field goods, drilling and other services, along with ONGC's capex decisions, opening up of E&P manufacturing and services base in India makes a sound business decision. I on this platform urge upon international as well as Indian business community to come forward to develop facilities in India to cater to large goods and services requirement of Indian E&P sector. ONGC has recently launched a rupees 100 crore startup fund to foster, nurture and incubate new ideas indigenously. In addition, ONGC has also taken up an industry academia research initiative jointly working with IITs and Indian Institute of Science. This is just a beginning. Make in India in oil and gas sector is a win-win for all. It is good for the investors if some of their pain points are solved. It assures them good long-term demand, high availability of engineering talent, low-cost labor, and above all, a welcoming government, and also long coastline to be able to export. It's a win for the users like us in terms of ready availability of oil field goods and services, reduction of mobilization time, and potentially costs as well. It's a win for the country in terms of more jobs, more revenue, and higher industrial growth. Let me bring to your notice examples from other countries that McKinsey also spoke about. Local content regulations, some of the purchase preference and other incentives have been commonly used in the beginning to develop local market. From a user's perspective, we need best quality services at competitive price. Talking to our colleagues in the industry and looking at various reports, it seems that some form of incentive would need to be given to develop a world-class competitive industry. Some examples of incentives were mentioned in the Kelkar Committee report on reducing import dependence, which include provide tax incentives to E&P companies who use service of Indian providers, set up a 5-year roadmap for enforcing local content guidelines in line with most other countries. However, we would need to weigh its pros and cons because its potential impact may be negative in terms of E&P bidding rounds. The alternative to this could be a persuasive approach and not a contractually binding approach. Provide other incentives to investors for manufacturing in India. On the point of removing pain points of the investors, we can consider the suggestion again given by the Kelkar Committee and also National Working Committee under the leadership of Sanjay Barman Roy, setting up of petroleum-specific export promotion zones with the following advantages: ability to service local and regional demand, availability of state-of-art infrastructure and utilities, fiscal incentives, single window clearance. Overall, to sum up, there is a lot of potential, a lot of advantage for everybody if we work together. We can really make in India happen. We as the flagship Indian PSU and India's energy anchor are more than happy to play our part. We have created a small film for about 4 minutes which shows Mr. Amitabh Kant talked of Kakinada. So in Kakinada, what we are doing in terms of our gas production, so a small film is there. I think that can be run.
India, the world's third largest economy and the third highest energy consuming nation. A country whose hunger for energy is growing as fast as its economy. A world with the potential to be healthy, wealthy and sustainable. The key to that sustainability is abundant clean energy. And the answer lies in gas reserves buried deep beneath the seabed. Our current government is focusing on exploring these reserves in offshore fields off the east coast of India. Today, barriers are being broken in offshore exploration techniques. New technologies are making deeper reserves accessible and commercially viable to explore. The deep-water Krishna-Godavari Basin, a pericratonic rift basin along the east coast of India, is being explored for its huge potential in gas reserves. ONGC, India's premier oil and gas exploration company and one of the country's Maharatnas, is all set to answer the call of the nation. ONGC has embarked on its most ambitious venture yet, Mission Deepwater. The theatre of action is set amidst the promising eastern offshore fields of Vashishta and S1. In a little over a year's time, the daily gas supply is estimated to increase threefold to 6 million cubic meters per day, or almost 2 billion cubic meters annually, with an expected ultimate recovery of around 16 billion cubic meters from Vashishta and S1. This calls for innovative technology and immense financial muscle. A network of subsea structures involving a chain field architecture, miles and miles of pipelines, and an onshore terminal in Andhra Pradesh. Partnering ONGC in this subsea endeavor is a consortium of L&T Hydrocarbon Engineering and McDermott International. They will be supported by a number of domain specialists. Mega ambition requires mega-scale facility. State-of-the-art modular fabrication yard at Katupalli, near Chennai, offers just that. It is for the first time in India that a spool base and reeling facility for subsea pipelines has been set up at Katupalli. The Vashishta and S1 development project adds another dimension to two key central government initiatives. At Katupalli, we combine global expertise with local manufacturing capabilities to make in India. The project also ensured the development of unique skill sets in high technology offshore engineering. This is just the beginning of ONGC's deepwater saga. By the end of 2019, the company's next gas production project will deliver an additional 16 million cubic meters per day, taking the combined output up to 22 million. It is our Prime Minister's vision to reduce national oil imports by 10% by 2022 and fill the gap with locally sourced gas energy. Government incentives in the form of better sale prices for deep water gas have spurred ONGC on to intensify its exploration and production activities. This is just the beginning of a mission to achieve abundant, cleaner fuel and complete energy security for India. A mission that ONGC and a supportive government will achieve together. Mission Deepwater. Energy for all.
Thank you, Mr. Saraf, for your informative address. I'll request Mr. Subramaniam Sarma, CEO and MD, L&T Hydrocarbon Engineering, to share his views.
Distinguished panel members, August gathering, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today and to be able to share my views and thoughts on a theme which is very dear to all of us in Larsen & Toubro. Personally, I have spent about 25 years of my professional life in the international arena, and I have had the fortune of interacting with several national oil companies, the big ones like Saudi Aramco, the K companies in Kuwait, the ADNOC group of companies, Petronas, and also international oil companies like Exxon, Shell, Total, BP. And during this interaction, I have reasonably developed an understanding of their perspective about India as a manufacturing hub and their perspective about India as a service hub. So today I'm going to present an international perspective as it is seen from the outside world. So just to start with, to set the context, I think there's been a lot of discussion about India's hydrocarbon story and since yesterday morning, and many of you must have heard this, but I think just to recap, India's hydrocarbon industry is very mature and is growing very rapidly. As we all know, this is the third largest consumer of oil and gas products in the world, and with accelerated economic growth, we talked about over 7 to 9 to 10%, this demand is going to only grow. Despite that, though there have been areas where we have improved the indigenization, there is still high dependence on imports, especially in the complex machinery, turbo machinery areas, specialized equipment, and high technology and services. There remains a gap. And for us to reverse that trend, it's very important that we start producing in India. So the Make in India theme launched by the present government is a very right step in the right direction. And there is also very encouraging that India as a country has all the ingredients and constituents to make this Make in India theme successful. It has a long industrial heritage. It has also large talent pool and very good demography. And it has also relatively low cost base to make it competitive. So it's a great opportunity to present ourselves, position ourselves as a global manufacturing and service hub. And to capitalize on this opportunity, it is extremely important that we build a robust Made in India brand. This is very important so that this Made in India brand becomes the natural preference for all our customers and consumers. It's not just about doing it in India. It's also about doing it with the right quality, right time, and with the right efficiency. And to deliver that, from an international perspective, there are a few challenges, as I see it, we need to overcome. We need some paradigm shift in our attitude towards some underlying issues. These are soft issues, these are mindset issues, these are attitudinal issues, but they are very important to sustain the Make in India campaign. It's not about doing it, it's not about starting it. If you want to sustain this campaign for over decades, so we need to address these issues, and some of them are like quality consciousness, a sense of pride, honoring commitments, and also increase awareness to health, safety, and environmental aspects. Now, let me expand this definition a little bit for a better understanding. The quality consciousness, I mean, what Henry Ford had said, quality means doing right when no one is looking. And today, if you look at our workforce, we still need a lot of supervision. And I think we'll have to work very hard so that we achieve this meaning of quality, that doing it right when no one is looking. Similarly, when I talk about sense of pride, I think every job is a self-portrait of the person who did it. It's our signature. The kind of it's okay attitude or chalta hai, what we call it in Hindi, is something which we need to overcome and we need to change. And similarly, the commitment. The commitment is a contract. Commitment of contract is a transformation of promise to a reality. It is the daily trump of integrity over skepticism. We can't afford to have people have skepticism on our performance. It has to be reassuring for customers that once they sign the contract, it's going to be delivered on time and quality. So these are the behavioral aspects we need to overcome, and it's possible. Definitely it is possible. And individually and collectively, as an organization and an enterprise, as business enterprises, as policymakers, we need to sort of inculcate and drive this behavior in our respective workforces. And part of it could also be addressed through the education system, so that at a very young age, we inculcate and reinforce these values in our society. In addition to these behavioral changes, which we need to work on together, there is also, of course, a need to support with the right policies. I think there's been a lot of discussion already on that. My panel member, Mr. Amitabh and Mr. Ramesh Abhishek, has already spoken about it, about how the government is implementing new policies to facilitate the Make in India campaign. And maybe we need some more incentivization for the Indian content in the domestic oil and gas projects to build the track record and to encourage the international players to partner with the domestic players. I think it's going to be a very collaborative effort. We are already making very good progress as a country. As we have heard earlier today from Amit Khera, that in certain areas we have made very good progress, and certain areas we need to cover ground. But it will all happen when we work in tandem with each other. It's the suppliers, the service providers, the end users, the regulators, the policymakers, all of us will have to work together to drive this campaign forward. And very soon, once we work in tandem, I have no doubt in my mind that once it takes off to a higher level, this will usher in a new dawn for the Indian economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for your enlightening address. Now I request Mr. Sanjay Gupta, CMD EIL, to address the audience.
Honorable Panel Chairman, esteemed Shri Amitabh Kant, distinguished colleagues, CNMD ONGC, COLNT, ladies and gentlemen. I think the context has already been set in terms of the background, in terms of the policy initiatives, and what really is happening in the hydrocarbon sector. For me, there is little to add insofar as this key parameter is concerned. However, a young country, an aspirational country, driven by a high growth rate, with a passion to deliver and a visionary leadership, I think the stage is set. And what better than the energy sector to form a critical component of this continuity. We at EIL have had humble beginnings in this sector, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank the entire oil industry and the Government of India for bestowing confidence and faith in us to indigenize. What a pleasure that in this country, in the hydrocarbon sector, there is hardly anything which is not touched by EIL, and touched in a manner that everything is indigenous. No engineering whatsoever is currently sought in this country from abroad. Yes, there have been beginnings. There has been a great brush with the technologists around the world, and that has given us the key essence as to what this nation can deliver in this critical sector. I think with pride, I would like to announce that EIL is geared up together with other oil company friends to very soon see a refinery of its own, everything domestic, including technology. I think we have come a long way, a long distance from our humble beginnings in 1965 to set the agenda of probably bigger installations than what we have in Antwerp, what we take pride of in Jurong Island. This will happen. In fact, it is already happening. Today, along with our oil majors, we are laying the footprints of some of the biggest installations which are going to happen in this country. We are looking into integration, bringing gas economy into our country, joining all our refineries, integrating them, looking at scale, looking at complexity. I think there is hardly anything which has been left untouched. Imagine a time when we started. In a typical refinery, we had only 10% of indigenous component. Today, the cycle is reversed. We take pride in almost 90% of the stuff sourced from Indian companies. A great manufacturing event, so to say, has been organized in the country. This is all through the extreme, dedicated, and hard work of the engineers within EIL and the entire oil industry. And as NMD ONGC mentioned, with the encouragement with oil majors such as ONGC who provided to us to make this happen. I see no reason to unturn what Mr. Khera said a while before. 25% of domestic component in the offshore segment will soon look very different. I think we are laying the footprints of alignment across the board, both in the upstream sector as well as in the downstream sector. We are no longer willing to remain isolated from the world. We are trying to join hands with them to try and see how best we can align. We are beginning to make big headway into the biofuels area. Today we may not have technology, but wait for a couple of years, and India will show that we will have the best. The team in EIL is already geared up with that, and I'm quite sure with the help that our oil majors are rendering to us, very soon we'll have technologies of our own, integrated plants of our own. We'll bring the cost of ethanol down drastically to try and see that we do what we all aspire to do. I think India is witnessing a transformational change, particularly in the hydrocarbon sector. We are no longer making fuel refineries. We are developing integrated complexes, very complex. And all this requires a vast equipment and manufacturing base. I think with the threads and the seeds of innovation already sown in the country, we see no reason as to why all of us will not get together to try and see that we get into something bigger, more solid, more substantive. The coastline which India has is a natural gift to us. Let us utilize this. We have set the humble beginnings of that to a major project in Nigeria. And I think some of my friends sitting in the audience over here would be glad to know that more than $1 billion of the jobs have already been secured in India. We will be modularizing to the highest possible capability and capacity in the country. This has set about a new trend. Even in project implementation, our trends are changing. Yes, we realize that we don't make enough cranes, enough logistics equipment, and here's an opportunity. Let the friends from the industry and abroad join hands together in this national endeavor. We have great opportunity, a solid framework being created by Mr. Amitabh Kant. Let us all join together in this mission to take it forward. I have no reason to believe as to why this will not happen. The only missing elements of a few large compressors and something in the cryogenics is the only end which has been left as a loose link in our upfront refineries. I think the oil majors are coming into the country. A lot of vendors are also showing interest. We in EIL are creating policy by which we can encourage foreigners to come and establish in the country. The first major policy is already in the market, and I think the results are extremely resounding on that. We have allowed foreign majors to come and join hands with their Indian-owned subsidiaries to get into complex equipment. And a lot of very, very sophisticated equipment are being now fabricated through that. This, as was mentioned in the context, is probably the decade for the country. We are going to see tremendous activity in the hydrocarbon sector, and we have no reason to believe that all the gaps which we had will be filled. And I'm quite sure the industry will join hands in this national endeavor to take it forward. Few things which I thought I must share with the House. There is a small study which we have conducted in EIL in-house. And as per our estimates, there is about $110 billion of investment expected in the next 5 to 7 years in the country in this segment. With this happening, in this particular breakup, 50% of it easily goes to the upstream segment, which essentially is going to be driven more by the vision of Mr. Saraf. But there is the other 50% which is equally important, which is going to bring about a big change in the LNG, pipeline, cryogenics, petrochemical segment. There are huge opportunities which are being created in this country, which I think the time is now ripe to take them forward. I think we have already emerged as a refining hub, and it is a given that new grassroots refineries will keep coming in spite of all the statistics which we keep seeing in the papers. The time has now come to also look ourselves into a petrochemical hub. We have a strong petrochemical growth, and this is an area in which we need to do a lot of development insofar as our manufacturing is concerned. A large segment of powder-based equipment are still not fabricated in this country, and this is a very significant component. Close to 30 to 40% of our equipment in the petrochemical segment are still imported. A huge opportunity for Indian manufacturers to join hands with the majors abroad to try and see that we bring this scale and opportunity in the country. We have no reason to believe that this will not happen. The opportunities are there, the environment is being created, the leadership is being provided. I think we are in for some great times ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Before I make my closing remarks, I request Mr. Amit Khera to conduct the question answer session. Please, you can put your questions to the panel or give your comments, suggestions. Mr. Khera.
Yeah, friends, so I think there will be mics around. Anyone has question, please introduce yourself before you ask and then address the question to a specific panel member. That would be helpful. I can see a hand back there.
Nothing? Oh, raise your question. Okay, please. Do you have a mic? Okay. Can someone hand him a mic?
So maybe the gentleman at the back does it first. Yes, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you very much for giving me
One
this
second,
opportunity.
excuse me. Maybe the gentleman at the back does it first. Why don't you, we'll call you next.
Okay.
You sit down, he has a mic. He has a mic already. We will call you next. Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you everyone for your wonderful presentations. My name is Alok from Invecologic, and we are really looking into energy economics of a lot of things that we've been talking about. One area which is not been specifically touched upon yet, and I think it's very significant in the context of increasing manufacturing in India, is the question that how robust is our supply chain framework in India, because supply chain realignment, supply chain optimization itself can lead to a lot of benefits. When we're talking about increasing the scale of manufacturing, especially in the energy sector, do we already have a robust supply chain in place? If not, what is being done about it?
And who are you addressing this question to?
Anybody in the panel? It's a fairly generic question, and based on your experience, I guess it can come from
Maybe
anyone.
Mr. Gupta, you take it, and then maybe Mr. Sarma, we can come to you next.
Is this the one? Hello. Yeah. See, on an average, about $2 to $4 billion of purchase is being done through EIL itself. I'm quite sure if you're going to put together the entire hydrocarbon industry, it's going to be a lot more than that. I think the question is very significant, but I thought it would have been more relevant some 30 years ago. I think we have a very robust supply chain in position. Yes, there are certain gaps, and those gaps are actually being filled. The fact that we are doing so much of indigenization and so much of good fabrication work already, I think this cycle has already been established to a large extent.
Mr. Sarma, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with what Mr. Gupta said. Both in terms of scale and size, I think Indian manufacturing, particularly for the downstream sector, except for the petrochemicals, what you mentioned earlier, is advanced a lot. But I think one area where it still remains a big issue in India is the logistics and the transportation and then infrastructure for the transportation. I think there's a huge amount of inefficiency. And that's one, I think as the infrastructure development takes place and we are better connected within the country, I think that should improve. But that's one thing which is really hurting the industry. But other than that, I think we are making good progress.
Yeah, so on supply chain, we have confidence. I think there are some gaps on travel infrastructure, I think, which will be sorted. Yes, there was a question, second row.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, sir. This is for the entire panel. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Murali from ONGC Rajahmundry. This is a general question addressed to the entire panel because I have also been dealing with and assisting the local MSME entrepreneurs in and around Andhra Pradesh. Generally, the MSME entrepreneurs are having a difficulty in the sense that they are not able to come up with within the time frame because they have a small capital infrastructure and there is a gap between the risk involved in investing and hence they are hesitating to come up with some sort of business development opportunities. I'd like anyone to throw some light on this to improve the deficiencies. Already somebody had talked about decreasing the sort of import content and licensing policies. There is also some gap to be covered regarding the helping them in achieving certifications because most of the cases we are requiring API certifications for all our procurements and they are facing difficulty in all these. If someone can throw some light on this, please. Thank you.
I completely agree with you. See, MSME sector, they hold the key to employment in the country, and we need to do far more for MSME sector than we have done. As a matter of fact, these days, there is a lot of brainstorming going on how to boost commerce and industry. There is a specific group of secretaries working on that, and there are a large number of policy initiatives that we are thinking of to promote the MSME sector. Some of the major challenges that the sector faces is that they need better technology upgradation. So we need to induct technology. Secondly, the labor laws need to be more flexible for MSME sector. Third, access to funds, access to low cost funds, or let's say funds at reasonable cost is another huge challenge for the MSME sector. and ease of doing business. Because whenever you don't have ease of doing business, MSME gets impacted far more than the large units. So all these issues are very much on the agenda, and we are all thinking of taking a number of initiatives that we will suggest to government on how to help the MSME sector. As a matter of fact, with Industry 4.0 coming now and more in the coming years, there is a very strong school of thought that believes that MSME will have a great opportunity in Industry 4.0 because they are quick to adapt, unlike the large units, large factories. So whether it is startups, the smart MSME entrepreneurs, they'll be able to adopt technology much faster. So as a matter of fact, MSME may have a huge advantage going ahead as we see the next 10 to 20 years. But for that, they need a lot of enabling environment, the right policies, access to funds, and the government is committed to provide that. Thank you. Anybody else?
Any last questions? Maybe we take this one as the last one, and then we can wind up. Okay, I will go for two quick ones. Ladies first, so ma'am, why don't you go ahead?
Hello.
We can hear you.
Good evening. Thank you, first of all, for providing clarity, direction, and food for thought. My question is with specific reference to positioning Make in India as the most preferred brand. Sri Sharma captured the behavioral aspects that we need to work on to make this happen. Is there any specific structure which is being put in place or a plan of action to make this happen? My question is to Sri Amitabh Kant.
When we started Make in India, actually we got all the secretaries to make a presentation to the Prime Minister of India after a full day interaction with the industry. And the petroleum sector had a specific plan of action, and which had to be implemented over a 3-year period. Medium term and 3-year was a long-term period. And subsequently, that is constantly monitored and reviewed at the level of the Cabinet Secretary. So there is a specific plan of action which is now being taken forward by Secretary DIPP. Some revision to that have been made, but there's a specific plan of action which is across sectors. It's not just for the energy sector, but across 25 sectors that were identified.
Mr. Abhishek, would you like to add something, or?
I think just to add that Make in India plans are being monitored regularly, and they are also being updated regularly. In the first instance, there was a big conference workshop in December 2014, as Mr. Amitabh Kant said, when all these plans were discussed with the stakeholders and were finalized. Now we have again revised them after consulting the stakeholders, and they are all being monitored. Government of India is very keen and very focused on Make in India, promoting Make in India program. So these are very tightly monitored programs.
So we heard there are plans and being tightly monitored. So the last question from the gentleman here.
Hello sir, thanks for the opportunity. I am Vikas. My question is more to Mr. Kant sir. We have been hearing about petrochemical wave in India as a next big thing in India. So if I look from feedstock perspective, we know India is already very reliant on imports for feedstock for refined products. So for the petrochemical wave, do you think it will, from the policy side, do you think it will be based mainly more on gas side, from gas to chemicals, or will it be based on coals? Do you think, will it increase our dependence on oil? So what are your views on that?
I think it's very important for India to go in for large complexes of petrochemicals. That's the real value addition, the real huge values that you get in petrochemicals. And therefore, we need to link up refineries to value addition. That's the next phase, and that's what's happened internationally. Unfortunately, in our country, we've not been able to do high level of value addition through petrochemicals. So I think feedstock availability for petrochemicals is a critical component. But if you look across the world, a lot of feedstock has been made available for adding further and further and further values across. And therefore, my view first and foremost is that the petrochemical ministry and the petroleum ministries must be linked together. They should be one ministry. There's no rationale at all for having one petroleum ministry and secondly a petrochemical ministry. So there's need for convergence and integration across. But the feedstock, a lot of value addition will happen across several sectors, across gas, across coal, across a huge amount of value addition needs to be done through new technologies which have come into being. So it needs to be cut across both gas and coal.
And maybe Mr. Gupta, since you're in the middle of all this, your thoughts on this one.
See, as so far as the country is concerned, if you look at the feedstock metrics for the petrochemicals, if you look carefully, we are surplus on naphtha. While there has been an upswing on gasoline, but there is a specific cut of naphtha, which is an extremely good feedstock for petrochemicals. I think while the world keeps talking about alternative feedstocks and predominantly gas, I think in this Southeast Asia, the naphtha crackers will still gain some dominance. The new projects which we are conceiving incidentally are all linked with naphtha crackers. That's not to say that we are not going to bring in gas out here. With the gas prices the way they are and what we are foreseeing in the future, there is tremendous amount of opportunity linked with gas import as an alternate feedstock. You're already seeing something happening in Reliance. There's a lot more to happen in the public sector crackers, so to say, which are under conceptualization. Plans are already being laid for that. I think the time is not very far off, then we are going to see a few PDH plants also in India. So I think the story looks good. We are going to join the whole world together. Globalization is a key word, so why not have it out here as well? It's going to happen. We will not push our crude import essentially because of petrochemicals. It will happen out of the value-added streams which are there in our refineries. There is tremendous amount of integration which can be done between one and the other. And even within our own refineries, there is tremendous opportunity to join one and the other and see to it that we have the right sort of mix and feedstock for scale and size to be achieved for an olefin complex. It'll happen. It's happening.
Friends, I see a lot of hands and a lot of questions, but unfortunately we have to close. I think this is the time. And before I hand over back to Vimy, I think thanks a lot, the panel. I think the diversity of the views was excellent. Mr. Abhishek, your encouragement on DIPP's commitment is heartening. Mr. Kant, your aspiration around people coming to India and finding it rewarding is great. Mr. Saraf, you gave us what ONGC is doing and the investments that are coming. Mr. Sarma, you talking about the softer aspects around safety, around HSE, and Mr. Sanjay Gupta, your confidence and the push around joint working in the industry was great. So thanks everyone, and I hand over back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Amit, and thank you to all our panelists. And as we close the session, a request to all our panelists to please step forward for a group photograph. All of them, in fact, showing a lot of confidence in the potential of India in terms of still the untapped reserves which we have, the talent, confidence towards Make in India, but at the same time mentioning that for Make in India to happen and to attract the expertise, the foreign expertise, a lot of conducive environments need to be created, and towards that a lot of support and a commitment coming from DIPP and from the Niti Aayog. So thanking all our eminent speakers of the session. And ladies and gentlemen, one of the largest display and the show of Make in India in the hydrocarbon sector is there in Pragati Maidan in the exhibition area. So whenever you get time, please also pay a visit there. Tomorrow also the exhibition is going to be on from 10 onwards till 6 o'clock. And today, as we mentioned, we also have the dinner in the Hansadhwani Theatre in Pragati Maidan, though the cultural program has been cancelled. We start with the next session at 4:45. So request you, in fact 4:40 you may be seated here. 4:45 we start with the next session. It is a ministerial session. Shri Piyush Goyal joins us in the session, the chair of the session, along with the Honourable Overseas Ministers.